How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? It's Manny here, welcome aboard. It's a pleasure to have you here. I hope you guys are having a good day. Today in this video, we are going to review the Venus Laowa 20mm F4.0 Zero-D Shift Lens. Before we start, I just want to make it clear that this video is not sponsored by Laowa, but I do want to thank the guys at Laowa for sending me one of the sample of this lens to test out so that I can make a review for you guys. All the reviews and personal opinions for this lens will come by myself and will have no input from Laowa, but they did provide me some information of the basics of the specs of the lens. So with that out of the way, let's get straight into the video. Let's start with how much it costs. So we are going to base this with the US dollars, but of course in different countries you will have a different currency, and of course the prices will also be different. Now the lens will cost you $1,099 US from the official Laowa website, which is not too bad considering the type of the lens it is. Normally this kind of lens will cost you a fortune to build purely because of the complexity of the lens, of how it was made. Now it will be available in 8 different mounts for different systems: Sony E mount, Canon EF, Canon RF, Nikon Z, Nikon F, Pentax K, Fujifilm G, and L mount. But because I have the Sony cameras, therefore we have here is the Sony E mount version. Now let's talk about the size and the weight. The measurement of this lens will be shown somewhere around here, and here we have the Laowa 20mm F4.0 Shift Zero-D Lens placed side by side next to the other Sony native E mount lens. We have here the 135mm GM 1.8 and the 1635mm f2.8 G Master. Now the weight of this lens is roughly around 747 grams, but all that will depend on the different system that you have for different mounts, which for me is not too heavy at all compared to the 135mm G Master, which is about 950 grams. Now when you stick onto the lens, it does stick out a little bit, but for me it's not an issue at all. And when you compare to the bigger lens like the 70-200 f2.8 G Master, for me it's not really a big issue. In terms of functionality, the Laowa 20mm f4.0 is a manual focus only lens. The shift capability of the lens for full frame lets you shift it by up to plus or minus 11mm. Just like the 15mm f4.5 shift lens, the angle of the view is 94.4 degrees, which is fairly wide, but not as wide as the Laowa 15mm f4.5. The maximum aperture is f4.0 and the minimum aperture is f22. And it has 14 aperture blades, so you can actually shoot at night and the bokeh will appear in smoother and rounder shape. The minimum focusing distance for this lens is at 25 centimeters, which is fairly decent, so you can actually get fairly close to the subject, but do watch out for the background blur because this is a manual focus only lens and it can be tricky to nail the focus sometimes. So after using the lens for a few weeks now, I can say that the handling of the lens is not bad at all. Just like the 15mm f4.5 is about the same size. However, the 20mm f4.0 does come with a lens hood, which helps to combat the lens flare, but it does add extra weight and it does also takes up a lot more space when you put it in your backpack. But having the lens hood is necessary to combat the lens flare, so that can be compromised. Ergonomically, it is quite well built. It is going to feel a bit different at first if you haven't seen or used a shift lens before, and you are definitely going to find it strange at first, especially with all these knobs and all this mechanism right here. With all this twisting mechanism, you will definitely find it strange at first, but once you get the hang of it, everything will just be fine. Now the Laowa 20mm body is made of metal, built like a tank, so it is very solid and durable. Unlike the Laowa 15mm f4.5, this lens now has decent protection around the glass thanks to the solid built lens hood to help protect any potential damage to the glass. The lens hood is adjustable for depending on how you take your photos, whether it be landscape mode or portrait mode, to prevent having the edge of the lens hood show up on your photos while still offering protection against lens flare. So what is shift lens? The shift lens is basically a lens that lets you shift a part of your lens in a different direction to allow you to fix the perspective and the varnishing point depending on the angle where you shoot. It's basically a perfect lens for architecture photography as well as interior photography. Most architecture photography you see will have those perfectly aligned or straight perspective or even vanishing point. For most architecture photographer, the last thing they want to see is those wonky looking building that converge into the middle of a photo that looks like a pyramid. You want to showcase the photos at the right perspective, present them nicely, and this type of shift lens is perfect for that. So just in case if you haven't seen my 15mm f4.5 review yet, I will just quickly show you again what all these buttons and knobs are and what do they do. So this is the locking mechanism. By turning it like that, it will lock up the lens and won't let your lens shift up and down. And you can unlock it as well. And after you unlock it like that, you can shift the lens up and down like so. The next thing you can do to this lens as well is to change the direction of the lens over here. If you want to shoot, say, an architecture on a landscape mode, you will have to turn it to 0 degrees, and that will let the lens move up and down. And by the way, you can also do vertical panorama with this lens as well by shifting up and down. Same goes with if you want to shoot architecture on a portrait mode, you can turn it to 90 degrees. And when you shift the lens, it will shift upwards and it will fix the perspective for you. Alongside that, you will also need to readjust the lens hood as well accordingly, as well as making sure that the lens hood doesn't show up on your photo, thus giving you the vignetting. And you can do that by turning it like that after you unlock these knobs right here, and if you lock it, it will stop moving. We will now have a look at the image quality of the lens. So as you can see from the shots that I've taken, it does really produce some super quality image. The sharpness are there from corner to center. At the corner, it is a little bit softer compared to the center, but that's usually a normal thing with most of the lenses anyway. And also because this is a zero distortion lens, so you can hardly see any distortion at all. So that means that all of the lines are almost perfectly straight. Not always perfect, but it's almost 90% of the time are straight, which is what you want for architecture photography. Last thing you want is some curvy looking building that doesn't look right. The one thing that this lens has that the Laowa 15mm f4.5 doesn't is actually the lens hood. This Laowa 20mm f4.0 now offers decent protection against the lens flare, and also the maximum aperture for the lens is now f4.0 rather than the f4.5. Thus that means then the lens will allow more lights to come into the lens. So shooting in blue hour or low light condition will now be better. In terms of using this as a daytime architecture / street photography lens, it is perfect. You fix those varnishing points and the perspective, and you'll get a nice and tidy looking image rather than those wonky looking buildings that your normal wide angle lens captures. For shooting at low light situation, this lens is also now decent for that too. I was shooting in blue hour and golden hour and there are lots of shadows, and during the shoot I was able to keep the ISO as low as possible because of the maximum aperture or f4.0. So the $1 million question: who is this lens for? The Laowa 20mm f4.0 is a very niche lens that are designed for people who loves to shoot the architecture / street photography and also want their perspective for the buildings to be fixed so that you get a straight line before going into the Lightroom for post-processing. Now of course in Lightroom you can also do that. You can also fix the perspective in Lightroom as well in post-production, but getting it fixed before going into post-processing does save you some time and also allows you to compose your shot beforehand, and if there are any fixes on the perspective needed in post, it's going to be minimal, and also you won't lose out on those frames. Now what do I mean by losing out the frame? What I mean by that is when you fix your varnishing points and perspective in Lightroom, normally Lightroom will automatically pinch and crop out some parts of the image and also twisting some angles of the image, and when Lightroom does that, it loses out some parts of the frame, and in turn you lose out some of the composition already that you originally composed during the shoot. Therefore, what this lens does is it helps you fix the issue to a certain degree before it will go into Lightroom to post-process and try and even fix any perspective that you want to fix. Now sometimes you have a super tall building and you are quite close to the building. You won't be able to fix the perspective whilst keeping the buildings in frame, and that's nothing you can do about it. You just have to step back a few steps and away from the buildings, so then the building won't appear to be out of proportion, and also it will be well within the frame when you shoot. So should you get the 15mm f4.5 or the 20mm f4.0? That all depends on you. 15mm offers you a wider angle and also allows you to get closer to the subject and the building, but 20mm offers you a tighter angle and tighter view. So if you are to shoot a super tall building, and if you have the 20mm, then you have to be further out away from the tall building than if you are using the 15mm f4.5. Now, equally at 15mm, you will get only an aperture of f4.5, but at 20mm, you will get an aperture of f4.0. And that means you will get more light traveling into the lens and the camera sensor. So basically, if you live in a city with super tall building and huge skyscraper, you might want to look at the Laowa 15mm f4.5. But if you live in somewhere where there are less taller buildings and less skyscrapers, or if you're planning to shoot the building from farther away, then 20mm is for you. Or of course, if you have the spare cash, then you can get both the 15mm f4.5 as well as the 20mm f4.0. And there you have it, guys. I hope I've covered most of the important part about the lens, and I hope that you have found this review useful. And if you do, don't forget to hit the like button. It will help out the channel a lot. And also do consider subscribe as well if you haven't yet. Any questions, just drop the comment down below and I will do my best to answer them. Until then, I will see you on the next video. See ya!